go. Bienvenidos, welcome. Thank you all for being here to join us on this bright November day. My name is Sue Cronmiller, and I am the director of El Sol Conexión and the curator of the Imagining Santa Ana series of public humanities events. This event is being recorded. We will post an edited version at a later time on our YouTube channel. I sound like a robot now. By participating, everyone agrees to be recorded. Please, all attendees, mute your audio during the program. Those of us who will be speaking, we might want to mute just until it's our turn and until, you know, we have our turn to speak. If you have questions and or comments to add to the conversation, please write them out in the chat feature. If there is time, we will read them for group discussion at the end of the program. I'd like to thank our partners who have generously provided support for this program. El Sol Academy of Arts and Sciences in Santa Ana, University Community Links, a network of university and community partners working together to develop innovative after-school programs, the University of California at Irvine, and the California Humanities are co-sponsors with El Sol of the Imagining Santa Ana series of public humanities events, of which today's event is a part. I'd also like to introduce Gary Gaiman, who is here from the Annenberg Center for Public Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. Gary will be our technical support professional for today. Thank you, Gary. Say hi. Dr. Ana Elizabeth Rosas is an associate professor of history and Chicano-Latino studies at UC Irvine, and I am honored to introduce her today as a partner and colleague on the University Community Links collaborations with El Sol Academy in Santa Ana. Say hi, Anna. Can we see Anna? Maybe you should take down the slide now. Hi, Anna. Hi. And I'll introduce Dr. Manuel Gomez with one of his own quotes. He's known to say, education is the foundation of the change we want to see. And truly, a giant of a man, a poet, activist, leader of social equity and education, Manuel Gomez has dedicated his entire professional career and more. After his retirement from his post as Vice Chancellor at UCI, he has given us much of his personal time to the educational advancement of all students from all backgrounds. I'm lucky to have known Dr. Gomez for over 20 years, and I'm proud to call him a dear friend, a colleague, and spiritual guide and fellow champion of the arts and humanities in education. I'm having a little tear. And here he is with an invocation of the theme for our program today, which is "You belong here in the garden that heals." Manuel Gomez.
Well, thank you very much, Sue, for that kind introduction. Ana Rosas and Gary, Monique, everyone that's helped build this program, I want to thank before I begin my comments. I wanted to just shortly speak for about 10 minutes on this topic and then get as much time with you in question and answer. So I'm going to go kind of hurriedly in a kind of a fast pace to some of the thoughts that I want to give. And I want to begin, besides my thank you and acknowledgement to everyone who worked for this program, with a practice and that I've begun and many other people have begun to acknowledge the ancestral First Nations people who were the first populators of this land, of all of these lands. And I'm in Orange County in Irvine. I don't know where some of you may be elsewhere. So I'm going to honor the Tongva and the Ahashamen peoples of this land that we stand on, that I stand on at this moment today. And as a way of fighting the amnesia of the erasure of this history, of the denial of this history, and worse yet, of the fantasy that these were unpopulated wildernesses, this land. I initiate every talk now that I do with this acknowledgement. And I start with the first poem I ever wrote as a way of honoring the spirit of the ancestors that are still here and that are still fighting to this day for their rights. The poem goes like this. The red sun's sword slashes my soul. Black blood flows from my darkness. I am the son of an ancient people. I cry tears of blood and fire. During the day, I hunt. And at night, I carry mountains on my back. So in Pennsylvania, where Gary is, there's a lot of other tribes, the Delaware, the Shawnee, the Iroquois, the Susquehannock, many other tribes all around. So I just did an honor for the tribes here in Orange County. The poem allows us also as a way of beginning to raise our consciousness, to raise our consciousness together and to focus our attention. Because in a way, the arts or poetry or any art, in a certain way, it's nothing more than the art of paying attention. In this remote virtual world, our listening skills are being challenged. We are now having to focus. So let's stay with this focus of the red sun and one common bond as we proceed in this discussion. In history today, December in 1520, exactly 500 years ago, Cuitlahuac and Tenochtitlan, the ruler that followed Moctezuma, died from smallpox this month in December, 500 years ago in Tenochtitlan. Cuauhtemoc, the young leader, assumed power of Tenochtitlan after that. And the Aztecs, the Mexica, the Tenochtitlan people kept fighting the Spaniards and Cortes until August of 1521. Now, why I concentrate on this 500-year cycle is there is a turning of the wheel that's going on now. There is a rising of consciousness. There is a reconnection with our own past and our own histories that is occurring. And why this is important is we have all still suffering from the traumas, the scars, and the memories of that conquest and that colonization, that many chapters that occurred beyond Tenochtitlan across all these lands with the invasions of the Europeans. The people of this land always have struggled with their sense of who they are and their identity, and to distinguish themselves from the Spaniards, from the outsiders, from the invaders. They called themselves Nican Titlaca, Nican Titlaca. That was their word for them. And what it meant is we, the people from here. That was how Nahuatl translates those terms. And that's how they distinguished themselves. They knew who they were and where they came from and who the strangers were and that they were not from here. And I know that there are a lot of limitations in discussing the Chicano movement, but I just want to mention one quick idea that came out of the movement. That was the creation, the development, the rediscovery of our own homeland in the concept of Aztlán. Aztlán, a mythical homeland of the Chicano-Chicana people that's here in this land. And with the support of the humanities, Cal Humanities, UC, I want to have a shout out to UC Links, to all my colleagues at UCI, Pennsylvania, Gary, and everywhere else, Charles up there in Berkeley, wherever else other people are, Mara. We've been working here with an extraordinary leader, Monique Davis, of an extraordinary school, charter school called El Sol, Science and Arts Academy here in Santa Ana, California. I could go on for hours talking to you about the accomplishments of this school, but I can't because it would take all day just know that El Sol is a particularly beautiful gem of a learning center in the heart of Santana, California, that's doing great work. We, with our collaborators and a few other people, have been dreaming, designing, playing, discussing, stumbling, moving towards an idea of creating learning experiences to alter the culture, not to alter the culture of the school, to alter the culture of our own perspective as a people in the school and as we proceed learning, to learn, to understand that there are many modes of learning, there are many ways of learning, and that we want to create experiences that liberate the imagination, that begin to decolonize the mentality of our students, of our people, that begin to let them know their true roots, their true stories, their true memories that have been erased in the textbooks, that have been eliminated, that have not been told. And so this change that we're doing, we haven't changed the culture, but we have created a lot of really intriguing, intimate experiences with all of our colleagues and collaborators, stumbling to try to create a culture that will liberate us, to be understanding that we belong here in the Garden of Healing. And in our collaborations, we want to enhance this remembering, this learning to know who we are from the inside, not the outside. There is an inner self that we tend to not remember, because the little girl watches her father go to work every day. And one day, she's 7 years old, she suddenly just gets up and asks her father, "Daddy, where do you go every day?" "I go to work, Laura." "Oh, wow. What do you do, Daddy?" "I teach." "What do you teach?" "I teach art." The little girl says, "What is art?" "Oh, Laura, I teach the students how to draw." And as she's playing with her pencils and her little book, she looks up and her mouth has completely fallen open and she says, "Daddy, you mean they forget?" We forget a lot more than how to draw. We forget ourselves. And many of the school's experiences are the ones that begin to erase our memory of who we are. Last story, real quick. Melissa Nelson, Turtle Mountain, Chippewa, an indigenous writer who writes about an incredible relevant prophecy that I've just learned about 6 months ago, and I'm fascinated with it. It's called the 7th and 8th Fire Prophecy. This is from the Turtle Mountain Chippewa Native tribe, but many, many tribes I've learned since have the same prophecies. It's relevant for our discussion about nativity, place, and identity today. According to the prophecy, Native peoples of North America are currently living in the 7th fire, a time of cultural recovery from the devastating traumas, scars, and hell of the conquest and colonization of the Native mind, body, and spirit. Now, this is where the prophecy really gets interesting, and it touches directly on us. According to the prophecy, urban and rural mixed race people, mixed race, not natives, mestizos, people will rediscover dormant traditional knowledge and practices, create new life ways, and begin to weave together a new culture of modern indigeneity. These will be the new people of the 8th fire, us, devoted to kinship, peace, and reciprocity. Now, isn't that fascinating? Why weren't we told this story in school? Wait a minute, there's more. The last part of the story is the light-skinned people, that's their quote in the prophecy, the light-skinned people will need to make a decision whether they will continue down the path of exploitation, oppression, and destruction, called the scorched earth path, or choose to pursue a new path of respect, reverence, and renewal. And when they join with Native people, a new green path of beauty and peace will prevail. Now, isn't that a great story? That we have not been told, that we have not heard. And this story says something very significant. We are native to this place.
Manuel. I will now turn the program over to Ana Rosas and her students. We love that introduction. Everyone say love, love.
Thank you so much to Dr. Gomez, to Sue, to Gary, to all the students that are here in terms of wanting to share this pathway you just initiated with the imaginary you provided around what we need to not lose sight of in this art of paying attention. And so all of your words really resonated so much in the context of all of what we've all been facing as we transition into this idea of learning together via Zoom. It's been quite a transition, and we hope that today's program is an opportunity to maximize on the connective tissue that it still allows us to share with each other. And so the first student who will be sharing their question with us is Geraldine Santos. And if Gary could turn us over to the PowerPoint, that would be great. And so, there you go. Thank you, Gary.
Hi, Dr. Gomez. My name is Geraldine Santos from Eastville, California. I am currently studying psychological sciences and Chicano-Latino studies here at UC Irvine. And after getting the opportunity to read your work, Dancing with the Sun, I was able to gather that your admiration of Manuel N. Trujillo's work stems from Trujillo's level of authenticity and love for Aztec cultural history. So a question I would really love to ask you is, what advice do you have for many of us who are striving to achieve social justice with that same level of love for Indigenous culture as part of our vision of social justice?
Thank you very much for both those questions. The first question regarding how we can become more effective with regard to understanding our own Indigenous roots. I said very quickly that there are many modes of learning. And I think that in speaking generally, we can speak about a distinct Indigenous perspective about learning. It's connected to nature. We learn, and it's connected to place, and it's connected to who we are. Most native names are we, the people of the river, we, the people of the mountain, we, the people of where they are. They're connected to their place. And most of their learning takes place in circles, not squares, not in lines. And there's no use of shame generally. We never use shame in learning. There's no D's and F's. Generally, in the Indigenous perspective of learning, it's an inner process, not an outer process. It's an inside activity that's not a commodity or a paper at the end of a degree, like the Western notion. I'm not attacking either mode of learning, by the way. I want you to understand this. I'm just expressing to you that there are different modes of learning, and there's a distinction, fundamental distinction between how you can learn about our indigeneity, because it's not going to be taught in the university, even in Chicano studies, most likely. It's got to get back to a grounding of your own ancestors, your own history, your own memories. And if you just look in the mirror, you'll see how connected we are to this land and to the people of these lands. Okay. We are the offspring of the conquest. It's hard to admit that because we have a lot of conflicts inside our own cultures. People that want to be white inside our culture, people that are prejudiced inside our culture against themselves, against their own indigenous. Therein you lie all the conflict about our name, Latinx, Chicano, all these things. That's parcel of that. So, but the best thing you can do is go inside.
Okay.
Stop going outside.
Thank you.
Next question. I don't know if you asked me a second question or not. Was there a second question there?
I think that was really well done, Anna. You have to unmute.
We're going to try to get through one question for each student. If we have time, we'll come back to Geraldine and she'll have an opportunity to ask her second question. So now we'll hear from Cassidy.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Dr. Gomez. My name is Cassidy Arias. I am a third You're at UCI and I'm a literary journalism major minoring in sociology. And my question to you today is, in Dancing with the Sun, you describe the artwork, Woodcuts, as vitally important because it centers on where you plan on going and its connection to where you're from with regards to your ancestral heritage. How does knowing your ancestry contribute to one's sense of empowerment and future?
You know, for a long time, I didn't know who I was. All through high school. From elementary, I knew who I was before I started elementary school. Once I entered into elementary school, confusion began. And a form of shame entered into my mind and soul when I was unable to understand it. In the 3rd, 4th grade, I came home and I could no longer say mama, papa. I was embarrassed. I had a thick accent. I couldn't speak English very well. I could only speak Spanish. And I developed my own weird term. I call my mom Mumsy, the closest word I could get to mama, which sounds English, right? And my father, I called him Pops, Popsy, Papa. Close to Papa, close to Mama, but not mother and father. So this is a kind of a profound confusion and shame that enters into the spirit of a young child who doesn't know what's happening. They're being tossed out of one culture into this schooling culture. And the schooling culture has certain objectives and aims in mind, which are not necessarily negative or bad. Learning is important of all kinds of disciplines, all kinds of ways of learning. But the issue of the cultural identity and the suppression of one's sense of self is what the assimilatory machinery of American education has done for centuries. It just chews up different minds and created the American identity. Something very important. However, today, we are still fighting who is an American? What is the American identity? The struggle that we have then is to understand when we discover that we belong here, that this is our place, suddenly our roots go deep and we can no longer be manipulated or transformed into something we don't want to be or something that we are not. It is a profound struggle. The culture is so omnipresent. The oppressive, distractive, attentive, grabbing culture is always attempting to lead you to where they want you to go, not to where you want to go, generally.
Great, thank you. Natalie?
Good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. My name is Natalie Aguilar. I'm currently a 4th year political science and international studies major, and my hometown is Whittier, California, and that's where I reside in right now. So one of my questions for you today is regarding Hispanic serving institutions. As you know, UC Irvine is one of 6 HSIs out of the 9 UC campuses, and recently I have had the privilege to be in conversations with other UC campuses who already are of HSI status or are emerging Hispanic serving institutions, specifically about how criticisms about HSIs beyond retention and graduation rates, and has to do much more with how HSIs prepares and serves Latinx and Hispanic graduates to serve our own surrounding communities post-graduation. Therefore, throughout your robust and compelling trajectory, how have you seen achieving HSI status impact not only UC Irvine, but the entire UC system?
Oh, you guys do have really great questions. You know, the HSIs are something very, very important, but they're not to be compared to the HBUCs or the Native American colleges or the even women colleges that are also sort of disappearing. Those colleges' mission is to serve those constituencies, to serve the Black communities, to serve the Native community, to serve the women's community. HSI's mission is not to serve us. They just became HSIs because we got 25% enrollment. And so the struggle that we have, let's make that a mission statement. Let's address to the chancellors and the presidents, okay, you're proud of HSI, you're boasting all this. Where does it show in the mission that you're going to do something for us and make yourself an HSI through a mission, through something distinct and additive? So I'm a critic of that dimension of thinking HSIs are the end all and be all of where we're going to arrive. We don't have anything near what the HBUCs have, which I admire. I worked in Washington, DC for a while, and I know that the federal government allocates monies to those specific institutional lines. And the struggle goes on every year inside there. The women struggle, the Blacks struggle, and they struggle with each other, and then they get their allocations. I learned that when I was there, and HSIs were not in the game. Anyway, that's one point. Second point, universities. Crucially important. Right now, the media and the courts are so polarized, and our politicians, that the level of distrust in our society is at a dangerous point, very dangerous point. And there's the universities that you're going to see and will be seeing, even though we have a Biden administration from the right, you will see an ongoing campaign to delegitimize university education. They're attacking the tuition aspect. They're attacking the affirmative action aspect. But really, they're not worried about those fights. The fight is to delegitimize the university so that the truth-telling, fact-finding, truth-seeking institution will no longer have any credibility in the larger society. And then we're in real, real trouble. This is the last institution right now, freedom of speech. It's not a freedom of speech issues that are being fought in the universities right now, believe me. I know what freedom of speech fights are. These are setups, they're traps. It's a campaign. So understand that you can't attack your institution because it's just an HSI and then attack it and then destroy it. We did that in the 1960s. I am an activist from the 1960s, and we attacked our wonderful, beautiful base, the university. Most of our chancellors, most of our faculty were not in support of the war, but they were invested in the war. The investment of the overall structure, the boards of advisors. So there was struggles inside the institution, but we shouldn't have attacked our base. We should have went out. We can't repeat that mistake. This cycle, we have to protect the institution, and we have to protect the courts and the media. And all three have been miserable to us. All three have a lousy history of exclusion, of stereotyping, of prejudice, of imprisoning us. And here we are. We have to protect the courts and the media and the universities.
Thank you so much for your for your response. I'm glad to see that, someone of your position and who has seen it all almost in the UC system shares the same criticisms.
That was a great question. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you so much. Now we'll turn to Petra.
Pretty name.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. My name is Petra de la Cruz. I am an alumni at UC Irvine. I graduated in 2019, and I majored in gender and sexuality studies and public health policy. I grew up and currently live in the Inland Empire, Montclair, Ontario area. And I just wanted to thank you for your words and for your wisdom and for allowing us the opportunity to learn more from you. So my question is largely informed by my interest in activism and immigrant communities. And it is, in your estimation, how are the intersections of art and activism essential in the formation of social movements such as farm workers movement, workers' rights movements, and immigration rights movements? Thank you.
Well, the arts are essential because our story has been excluded from the textbooks. So public art, we reclaimed our history in our buildings, in the public, in our barrios, and we reclaimed our history in the Chicano studies classes every semester. We're uncovering hidden stories of ourselves. So the nexus between art, it's really interesting, by the way, because in Mexico and in Cuba, art followed the revolution. But in here, in the Chicano movement, it's a reverse. Art preceded, so to speak, the Chicano revolution or the revolution. There hasn't been a national revolution, but art began first and blossomed. Of course, it continued blossoming after, if there is such a thing as the post-Chicano movement, which I don't believe in, but some people do. So it's still ongoing. The relationship between these three struggles is pretty important because they're not linked. And in the 60s, we didn't link ourselves either. The affirmative action wars in the 1960s lost because after the analysis was made is that the women and the Blacks and the Chicanos and the Asians were all in different positions. We weren't united, even though the society all supported, and all of us more or less supported affirmative action. It fell apart because there wasn't a strong enough coalition of unity among these groups. And to a certain extent, even within our own community, the gay rights community, the farm workers struggle, and the immigration rights, they're like, they're not unified. We don't think in coalitions and we don't think in collaboration, we think in bubbles, little bubbles of, and social media has contributed greatly to that isolation and fragmentation. However, social media also has this power to create this George Floyd moment where communication takes place and people show up, boom, and a mass protest can occur. So I'm not attacking technology, but I am warning ourselves about technology and how social media and these can create separate fields rather than connecting the furrows into one great struggle, one great field, one garden where all the trees are going to have some good nourishment, not just a few, where all the flowers will receive sunshine. The sun comes out for everyone, poor and rich. Es un dicho, ¿verdad? El sol sale para todos. The way I look at my work, I never looked at it as a career. And I don't know that this is good to say to you, but it was my experience. I looked at it as a struggle. I didn't ever think of it as a career. I started out just working. I was happy. I was getting paid to bring in Chicanos and Latinos and African Americans and minorities into the university. They were paying me to go out to the schools and bring students to the university. And I believed in education because it is indeed, as Sue introduced me, in my view, the foundation, the actual golden key to our own beginning of the opening of the door to our liberation. It is a key that will open that door for all of us, learning and becoming something significant to be able to contribute and make our world better, to make our community better, to make our lives better. Everybody has said this to you. I'm going to say it again. It's going to be real cliche. The wonderful, wonderful, beautiful thing about knowledge, about learning, nobody can ever take it away from you. You can never lose it. It's really powerful. Josie.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. My name is Josie Sandoval. I am a fourth year history major at UCI, and I am from Laguna Beach, California. I appreciate the opportunity to learn from you, and I really admire your trajectory, which raises my question. After years of witnessing and studying the injustices that farm workers experience in California, why do you believe such injustices are still not widely covered by news outlets, especially during such trying times like our COVID-19 pandemic, where farm workers are among the most disenfranchised of essential workers? Thank you.
and farm workers and Latinos on almost every category of work that they're involved in have all been categorized as essential workers. A beautiful new term that just came into our world of the pandemic, right? Essential workers, wow. Put that in quotes. Farm workers, garbage men, restaurant workers, these are invisible essential workers. We talk about the front line, the nurses, the doctors, the firemen, the policemen, all the time, over heroes, heroes, heroes. When have you heard the farm worker as an essential worker or put forth as to what's happening to them? And yet every evening, every night, we depend on their work, that they risk their lives to have food on our table. And they have no choice. Not only because they're essential workers, they have no choice. They have no choice because if they don't work, they can't eat. They can't pay their rent. They can't go to the doctor because they're afraid of the information being turned in. They can't talk to other people saying that I have COVID-19 because they're afraid that they'll be deported or excluded or problems. They have to keep working. So the one interesting thing about COVID-19 to me is that it has revealed the glaring inequalities of our society for all to see, and nobody can deny it, including starting with George Floyd on the social justice, on the economy, on the public health, on climate change, on the national election. Right now, the national election is being challenged by the outgoing president, if you really look at it, based on minority voters. He's attacking the cities and he's attacking Democratic states that won, but all the Republican votes, those were legitimate and right. I mean, I don't want to get into that struggle, but the point is that we had a president that attacked us as robbers, rapists, called us worse than snakes, was beginning to down the road of dehumanization in his first day before he even became president, and maintained it throughout his 4 years. We have so much work to do starting now, but especially after January 20th. Believe me, in my estimation, very little is going to change until we rise up again and raise our voices, not only ourselves, but all of us together to demand that we respect each other, that we accept each other, and that we understand that we are all one human bond, all of us, and that all of us belong here in the garden of healing, and all of us need healing.
Thank you so much for that answer. And thank you again, Josie, for the question. I would appreciate Alice joining us.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. I'm a UCI graduate back in 2017. Right now I'm applying to master's and PhD programs. My question for you is, do you think that UCI can continue to push boundaries in Orange County, not just like student diversification in UCI, but socioeconomically?
Well, I think there are lots of blind spots still with the university in general with regard to diversity concerns and issues. Mm-hmm. Even though I also know that the University of California has done extraordinary, unbelievable work on behalf of diversity and continues to do so. I just read and learned about some, the Morrill Act. It's an important, beautiful act in 1868. I've always read about it and I've always been proud of it. And I've always been proud to be part of the land-grant movement. Land-grant colleges, there are 52 land-grant colleges in the United States, including Cornell, by the way, which is an interesting one, private and public. But the University of California is, of course, a land-grant institution. You know what that means? The
Yes.
moral in 1868 meant that they, during the Civil War, they basically provided all these lands to create A&M colleges, agricultural and mechanical colleges. They sort of started out that way, but then they, academic drift. We all want to be scholars and the PhDs and experts. So all the colleges that were A&M just kept on moving away from agriculture and mechanics, although they maintained some of that. Davis did for us. The point is this: where did that land come from? They stole it all from the native peoples, all these institutions, or some of them paid a little bit of money. Some of them paid a little bit of money, but nothing compared to what the actual value of the land is. And there's a brand new research underway right now. I think there was a total of 480,000 acres taken. And the key is this: it wasn't just the creation of institutions. Many of these institutions, by the way, like Princeton and Gonzaga, were started out with fundraising to become indigenous colleges, Indian colleges. Princeton started out that way. They just got a $5 million gift yesterday from an alumnus for a Native American scholar that they're going to hire. Ireland. So I don't want to lose my track. The point I was trying to state is that there was transfer of wealth, immense transfer of wealth, and it continues to this day. There's many of the institutions, including UC Berkeley, that has lands that are land grant colleges awarded through the land grant that are generating revenues. Now, that's all important. Why do I say all that? Because I think that the important thing that universities should do is initiate a true, authentic, deep-rooted conciliation commission. You notice I didn't say reconciliation. I said conciliation because I don't think we've ever been reconciled with the Native American. Never. There's been no reconciliation. So we should start a process of, like many colleges are doing, of digging into the history of whose land was this. How much do we have for the Tongva and the Ahachamen people in UC Irvine? Do we have anything for them? How many Native scholars do we have at UCI that belong to this community? None. Zero, 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 zero. Now, why I believe we should start with Indigenous studies is that because it is the beginning, and it leads to mestizos and to African Americans, and it leads to the unfolding of the history of what we have to reconcile with ourselves. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No,
Yes, you did. That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gomez and Alice. We now turn to Mariana Machan.
Hi, Professor Gomez. My name is Mariana Machayan. I'm from San Diego, California. I reside here in San Isidro in the border city, so it's very beautiful. You can see Mexico from there. But I major in psychological sciences, and I also minor in Chicano-Latino studies. I actually appreciate very much being here with you because I love that you're interested in education, but in art history at the same time, which brings me with this question today. After reading Dancing with the Sun, I noticed that you emphasize the vibrancy of Manuel Trujillo's art. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, how do you think Manuel Hernández Trujillo would want his art to resonate among our generation of students? Thank you.
Well, with regard to K-12 education in Orange County, I think, of course, all the arts should be enhanced further, but particularly the minority arts, the minority cultures. You know, Santa Ana is 80% Plaza. So our language is using the word Indian. I hate to use the word Indian, right? Because it was Columbus's stupidity that he thought he was in the Indies. So all of that kind of a confusion is bad. But Manuel Hernández Trujillo was an artist who had studied in Mexico and is from here. But he believed strongly in cultivating the arts, dance, music, poetry, song, all of it as a fundamental dimension of all of our basic education. It's what happens with the arts and me. I've been studying a lot about the arts. I wish I was an artist. I'm a pretend poet. But there's a Gabrielle Starr. She's a from MIT. Now she's a chancellor, president at one of the Claremont colleges. She wrote a book called Feeling Beauty. Interesting title. It's a study of aesthetics, and she does a study of the mind. And this is knowledge that we now have, factual knowledge. When you have an aesthetic experience, a true aesthetic experience, your mind changes. Everything in your mind lights up. Perception, memory, temporals, almost all the mind's functions light up when you're having a true aesthetic moment, whether it's a dance or you're listening to a song or you're creating a song or you're playing the guitar. When you're in that moment, your mind is completely alive and changed. It's changed. Unfortunately, probably it's only temporary. But here is the power of the arts. It can alter our perspective about ourselves or about anything. And it reaches deeper. It goes kind of to your heart. If you have an aesthetic experience, if you like a poem, or if you like a poetry, if you like a song, or you wrote something yourself, it comes from this deeper place within ourselves. That place that I started talking about regarding our inner soul, our inner self, why I'm sort of contesting schooling is because schooling takes us outside of ourselves. Everything from schooling is really outside oriented. And the hunger that I feel that students have is this hunger for some inner meaning, for some sense of what am I doing here for real, and answering it for yourself, and then driving with that pursuit toward your dream, your happiness. In K-12, if we were to introduce more mariachi music, if we were to introduce more indigenous cultural drumming, if we were to introduce more of the meaning of Dia de los Muertos on a truly cultural, complete level, we would begin to understand that we belong, that we're not visitors here or strangers or illegal aliens or any other damn categorical term that they want to place on us. Yeah. And just look at yourselves in the mirror all the time, and then look at your native relatives from here. You know, they don't always recognize us, and we don't always recognize ourselves, right? Mexicans fought Indians too. And so it's a convoluted, complex unweaving of our umbilical cord that we have to do to be able to find ourselves and then do something good in the world. You can't do it if you're confused, or you don't know why you're doing it, or you're kind of bumbling around trying to be good. You have to be rooted in why you want to do something.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana.
I don't talk too much.
Now we'll work with Georgina.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. It's a pleasure to have you here today. My name is Georgina Zelaya-Espinoza. I'm currently in my last year at UCI, pursuing a double major in business economics and Chicano-Latino studies. In your book, Dancing with the Sun, you pay tribute to the life and artwork of Manuel N. Trujillo. And such work has shed light on the lived experiences of Chicanas and Chicanos in the context of their identity formation. As you mentioned in your book, Trujillo's artwork reflected confidence, proud knowledge of our roots, and a fierce desire to struggle for social change. That being said, what advice would you have for others who similarly want to educate people on the silenced experiences of Latinx populations here in the US?
Well, you know, I had a philosophy when I was working. I hope people don't get mad, but it goes down like this. Either you kiss ass or you kick ass. There's two ways of approaching the world, right? I mean, and kick ass to me means you work hard, you prepare the best, and you kick ass because you know it all. Now, the other way you can get advanced, you can, but you're not going to achieve anything, and you'll reach some kind of plateau, and you won't be really that happy going that route. I can share with you that experience that I had. In some ways, it was kind of interesting because it also happened in December, and it happened 50 years ago. In 1969, it's 51 years, I guess, on December 8th, I refused induction into the armed services against the Vietnam War. And I wrote a letter and I published it and I passed it out at the Oakland draft board on the basement when I didn't walk across my body. They actually asked my body to cross the line. 3 times they ask you. So it does come down to your body, cross the line. It's hard to 3 times not to do it because it's a lot of force and pressure. Anyway, I did it. And I wrote this letter. I'm going to just read 2 little paragraphs of it for you as part of an answer. Is that okay, Georgiana?
Yeah,
Today,
thank you.
1969, I must refuse induction into the armed services of the United States. In my veins runs the blood of all the people of all the world. I am a son of La Raza, the universal children, and cannot be trained and ordered to kill my brother. For my people, I refuse to respect your induction papers. It is well known that Mexicans were among the first victims of your empire. The memory of the Mexican-American War is still an open wound in the souls of my people. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is a lie, similar to all the treaties signed with our Indian brothers and sisters. The war did not end. It has continued in the minds and hearts of the people of the Southwest. Strife and bloodshed has never stopped between us. This society with its Texas Rangers and Green Berets has never allowed our people to live in peace. The blood is still moist on the land. My people have known nothing but racist tyranny and brutal oppression from this society. Your educational system has butchered our minds, stung our hearts, and poisoned our souls. You cut our tongue and corrupted our culture, making us strangers in our own land. The sweat of my people water the fields, and their aching bones harvest your food. In the short time that you have held the land, we have felt the pain of seeing beautiful lands turned into parking lots and freeways, of seeing the birds disappear, the fish die, and the waters become undrinkable. Seeing the sign, private property, hung on a fence surrounding lands once held in common, and having our mountains become but vague shadows behind a veil of choking smog. I cannot betray the blood of my brothers. We are all branches of the same tree, flowers of the same garden, waves of the same sea. The Vietnamese people are not my enemy. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gomez and Georgina. We'll now turn to Andrea.
Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. It's very nice to meet with you today. My name is Andrea Leiva Suarez. I'm a transfer student to UCI, and I'm majoring in art history and minoring in Chicano-Latino studies. I currently reside in Glendora, California, and having also been raised by immigrant parents, I wanted to know how having been raised by immigrant parents been instructive to your approach in leading and mentoring students throughout your career. Thank you.
I love the images and the questions, the way they were written up. Really nice selection of art. You know, the one thing I can say straight up that I learned from my father and the immigration experience, and the really the migrant working experience. I have a fierce work ethic, and it's not only because maybe I internalized that stereotype about lazy Mexicans sleeping against a cactus, which is a complete stereotype stupidity, right? because anybody who's ever worked in the fields knows what hard work it is. And anybody who's ever worked in the fields knows how competitive it is among each other. We try to get to the end of the furrow as fast as we can, and how we laugh and struggle. Work is something that I have a lot of respect for, regardless of what quality or type or style or any kind of work. All work to me has dignity. All work has dignity. That's valuable, real work, whoever does it. And all has to, we have to respect that. Our culture doesn't. Our culture thinks hand labor, stoop labor is not for them. Farm workers are not protected to this day with the national labor laws, because the Democrats at that time in the South, who had just freed the slaves, wanted to maintain a peonage system in their fields, and they did. And the Republicans and the Congress let them do it, and they did it again in 1937, excluded domestic workers and farm workers. Two little categories. Interesting. Essential workers, but they're not going to be protected. That's our situation right now. I guess I'm sharing with you that my migrant experience has formed and shaped my perspective on our culture and on our society and what needs to be done. We cannot go back to normality. That would be a disaster if we just go back to what things were before and we think that that's going to be good. Remember what COVID-19 did. It pulled away the rag to see the reality of the inequities in public health and economy, injustice and climate change in the election. Every single one of these factors you can see, and every single different discipline that you're in, by the way, dive into those disciplines, psychology, law. The university has a special thing. Remember we talked about the media and about the courts and about politics and politicians and everything? Weird, they all come out of the university. All those lawyers, all those politicians, all those bankers, all those economists, all those journalists, all those doctors, they have to go via the university. So I'm really making an argument for get focused on your education, do the finest possible work that you can do. Double down, work harder, focus, get into graduate school. Get into the knowledge that you want and unwind the strands of your dreams here in this society. And that's what's going to give us true HSIs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gomez. Now we'll learn from you and Kevin.
Hello, Dr. Gomez. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate your time and the work that you've done in the field. My name is Kevin Rivera, and I'm a fourth-year student. I'm at UCI, and I'm double majoring in Chicano Studies and Sociology. And I've taken a keen interest to your book, Dancing with the Sun, and I actually wanted to ask you, in your book, you write, "Today, with the twists and turns of a world in turmoil, we are reminded of the impossibility of escaping the contradictions and dilemmas of our troubled times. In fact, in the world of chaos, cruelty, and confusion, our history of brutality, devastation, colonial exploitation, and survival, our mestizo heritage fits right in. Aquí estamos en nuestro mero mole. We are here in our very own stew. We were born for this global era of multiple hybrid transformations." And so I've been grappling with this quote because it brought two ideas to me. The idea that this turmoil and struggles of Chicanos and Chicanas and Latinos and Latinas in a way hybridizes our ability to adapt and transform after trauma or substantial events. And secondly, that we as Chicanos and Latinos as a whole are destined to be catalysts of change due to this inherited adaptability. Do you find this to be a trait that can help us grow or one that may debilitate us?
Ooh. Could you leave the question up for a second? I guess not. You can't put the question back up? Thanks, Gary. I remember writing that about aquí estamos en nuestro mero mole. I'm doing a program right now on farm workers with another project, a video program on the plight of farm workers under COVID-19, and it's entitled "The Harvest, the Season of Suffering and the Harvest of Chaos, Harvest of Chaos." And the reason I bring that up is, of course, there was chaos in the conquest. There was the encounter between Cortés and Moctezuma. You can't imagine two worlds coming together like that. I've dreamed and thought and studied and imagined that encounter with Moctezuma and Hernando Cortés. And also Malinche Marina, right there with them, because she really was the key to the conquest. There wouldn't have been a conquest without Marina. She was the translator and the savior of Cortés numerous times as they traveled from Veracruz, the name they gave that little place, into Tenochtitlan. And the rivalries among the Aztecs were exploited. Cortés used them. So there was chaos. It was that's what I meant by mero mole. Like today, to me, this moment is a moment of societal, global chaos. Where autocratic orientation, tyranny orientation, there's lots of bases of fear. Fear is dominating the politics of our time, as opposed to ideals or hopes. There was a backlash, obviously, from the Barack Obama hopeful presidency to this individual we have in office still today until January 20th. But to see those how do you call it, a pendulum swinging back and forth, that's sort of what's the way our country has, from a civil war to Reconstruction to Jim Crow to civil rights movement to World War II to putting everybody back to the hippie movement, anti-Vietnam War movement in the 60s. So this is the important thing about Manuel's work and his issue of how we can make a bigger impact. How do we? This has been an ongoing discussion right now among many senior old guys like me, Chicanos, asking silly questions like, where is our national speaker? Where are our national spokespersons? In this moment, particularly, that's so possibly pregnant with transformational possibilities, with new possibilities of better relationships among us as a society, we're missing. Immigration is not an identity. Everybody's immigrants. We're all immigrants. We're immigrants in time, if not in place, right? The global dimensions of our time, in my estimation, require us to, you guys, not us, I don't know about me because I don't have new imaginative ways of relating with each other. And you are creating it. There's been pivotal changes like on gay rights. It was a long struggle. We didn't see all the previous struggles, all the battles, all the really hardcore stuff, but all of a sudden, boom, because they had a legal strategy. So this is the last thing I want to say about this question. One of the things that I believe we lack as a people is a strategy. And remember, 500 years, todavía somos mocosos in the landscape of humanity. We're snotty little brats compared to the 7,000, 10,000 year Chinese cultural tradition, 7,000 year Jewish tradition, 2,000 year European cultural tradition. Now you can contrast that to the 10,000s of years tradition of the native peoples. So, hey, we're not only 500 years mestizos, But let's add those 500 years to the 10,000 years of our relatives, the natives, native people. And if we do that, then we can begin to dig for new knowledge, unburied epistemologies that are being covered up, ways of knowing that we can begin to understand related to fire protection, related to death, related to respect for elders, related to nature, related to each other, to respect each other. There are native indigenous modes of learning that this society in 2020 could benefit from immensely. And you have it. Or you have to uncover that and develop it and create those new creative life ways that the prophecy talks about.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez. Thank you, Kevin. We'll now turn to Jacqueline.
Buenas tardes, Dr. Manuel Gomez. My name is Jacqueline Torres. I'm a psychology and Chicano-Latino studies major, currently residing in Lawndale on the Quiche and Tongva lands. With such a truly inspiring trajectory through your activismo y liderazgo, I'm curious to know who has been a role model that has had lasting resonance in your life, activism, leadership, and career trajectory. Thank you.
Well, you guys, you asked really beautiful, complicated questions. I would repeat that first part.
The first question?
Just the first part.
Okay. Who has been a role model that has had lasting resonance in your life, activism, leadership, and career trajectory?
You know, this is really an interesting question because earlier there was a question about my father and I didn't respond to it. Jacqueline's question about was I ever in a conflict or a dilemma of facing that my father was a laborer and what was I to do? And the truth is I did. I faced that dilemma and I was embarrassed about my father and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I thought, was I going to be just what my father is, sort of thing? You know, a young man or a young woman, you look at your parents and you figure, are those my limitations? So I went through that. I discovered through time and learning and myself to respect my father a great deal. He was a musician and a rebel. He didn't work in the fields. We got kicked out of a camp in Colorado and came to California permanently because he was working in a bar and as a janitor in a theater. So he was a rebel. We lived in a camp, although my mother and my older brothers, we did work in the fields, but my father was raising resources in a different way all the time. And we came to California and he got a job as a laborer in a concrete factory making pipes. One day my father took me to his work and I was feeling depressed and so I came back and I lasted 1 week and he knew what he was doing. My hand, it was hard work. He said, yeah, so go back to school. So I did, I went back to school. It was a lot easier, I'll tell you that. Reading and writing and thinking, much easier, much easier. It's a kind of a different kind of work. So I learned that. I learned that, but so in a way, my father is indirectly one of my icons. And my mother is too, because she's the one that introduced me to poetry, in a sense. She went to the 3rd grade, my father went to the 2nd grade. My mother did learn to read and they both learned to speak English. But my mother would step outside and say, mijito, ten cuidado, un viento de la muerte. She would, be careful, son, there's a weird, evil feeling in the wind today. Or, ooh, what did you dream last night? And I was a little boy and I'd sit at the table with my aunts and my mother and her sisters. And the first question they would ask is, what did you dream last night? And they would discuss their dreams over coffee, a coffee pot that was endless. It would never end. It was always coffee It was a miracle coffee pot, never ended. And they would drink their coffee and talk, and I would pick up. So this is a longer round a long way about saying, I could have said, I don't have any heroes. And I was going to say that. And I was going to say it by saying this, because every time I had a hero, I would either be disappointed and or I would be less myself. So I decided a long time ago in high school, I'm not gonna have heroes. I don't have heroes. I got to do it myself. Although the truth is, I didn't do it myself. I had a lot of heroes, a lot of supporters, a lot of individual teachers that helped me in very interesting ways when I didn't even know I needed the help. And I could go into that a lot, but I did receive a lot of individual interventions in my life from individual strangers, teachers that decided that they were going to do something extra for me. And that's how they got me out of the pipes and not being in the work that my father was. I wasn't necessarily going to go to college. I lived in Santa Anita in the barrio. My older brother didn't graduate from high school. My sister did graduate from high school, but she started working right away. And not a single uncle. And all my wide, big family, not a single uncle, aunt. Now remember, I was born in 1946, so I'm a different generation. None of my uncles had graduated from high school. Not a single one. Or my aunts. And I have a big family. I come from a family of 4 brothers and 4 sisters. I don't know where I'm talking about. I'm just showing you that it's a struggle to not become limited by what your parents do or who they are or how they think. In many respects, it is your responsibility to go way beyond what your parents have achieved, what they think, or who they are. And that's out of love and respect for them. But there's always that dilemma of the emotional ties. For example, my older sister, my parents would not let her move out of the house until she got married. And she, so of course, college was not even an option for her, even though she had graduated from high school. She wasn't going to leave the house. So these cultural dynamics and patterns, we have to struggle with and examine and live with and forgive. I think most of you in a certain way are kind of still too young to forgive your parents. I feel that way. I feel you still got tensions to work out and dilemmas and stuff to go through. You got to go through more fights. But you must reach this point where you understand they've done the best that they can for you. Every single one. And that they want a better life for you. They really do. It may manifest itself always that way, right? Especially for the younger kids. I really want parents to start buying books instead of soccer balls for their kids, right? Or you can buy a soccer ball too, that's okay, but a book too. We need to, this is the last point I want to say. Finally, I got to something that's substantive. We need to initiate a scholarly tradition in our culture. We have it, but it's fairly anemic, contrasted to other cultures' scholarly traditions. We need to cultivate one fast. So all of you scholars,
I think we have room for one more question. And I'm just looking at the time, but we can keep going. But this is a question by Ana Delgado.
Hello, Dr. Gomez. My name is Ana Delgado. I currently reside in Norco, California, which is close to Corona. And after having listened to you speak, and honestly, it's very inspirational. I think I speak for all of us that like, it's very eye-opening, especially the beginning and just how you kind of like guided us to connect to who we are. I'm very curious, and this is what led me to my question. What has been a piece of advice that has been most helpful for you throughout the whole of your trajectory?
Trabaja duro. Si Dios quiere is some remark that I always used to hear my mother make all the time, and I'm kind of angry about it, to tell you the truth, because I've been thinking about it lately because it sounds fateful too much. Like we can't change the future. Si Dios quiere, si Dios quiere. That was a phrase that comes in, but I love dichos. And the one that I do like as a piece of advice for myself is Benito Juárez said, what do you say? El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Benito Juárez was the first and only indigenous president, I guess, of Mexico. He said, the essence of peace is the respect for the rights of others. In my work, I had a lot of fun because I never really looked at myself as a manager or a boss. In all candor, I looked at myself as part of a struggle for greater social justice. And I moved into the university structure temporarily, I thought, escaping the more difficult pressures of the Bay Area during the Nixon administration. Everyone began to seek out a little bit of we used to call it an umbrella, a protective mechanism from the rains that were coming down from Washington. And a lot of people ended up in universities and education and so forth, thinking we were going to be there for a year, 2 years, and then get back into it, get back to the streets. I came here thinking that same way. I came back, even though I'm from Orange County, I was up in the Bay Area, came back, and all of a sudden I turned around, 10 years passed, and I turned around 20 years. I turned around, and because of my work ethic, nothing else, I kept getting promoted. Because I did everything. I would do the brochure. I would do the talk. I went to the high school. I talked to the teacher. I loved doing it all. It wasn't that I was being exploited. I was in the movement, in the struggle, trying to develop our intellectual capacity for our community. That was my objective. That was my strategic goal for the movement, to create an intelligentsia that would help us advance further. Well, our intelligentsia got kind of bureaucratized, which happens, maybe myself as well. And the cutting edge fight has now, that torch has been passed on to you, for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Gomez. We'll turn to Jessica Velasquez.
Hi, Dr. Manuel Gomez. I truly appreciate you taking some time to meet with us today. My name is Jessica Velasquez. I'm a 5th year Chicano-Latino Studies major and education minor, and I'm zooming in from my hometown of Pomona today. As a Chicana UC Irvine student, I feel proud of having Manuel Hernandez Trujillo's artistic presence on the UCI campus. However, I feel that we still lack representation in our campus beyond the Cross-Cultural Center and the Department of Chicano-Latino Studies. What do you think needs to change for college campuses like ours to become more invested in preserving Chicanx art history, experiences, and leadership? Thank you.
More graduate students and more faculty. Those are what you will find within the university. They love dealing with diversity with undergraduate students. And that's a reason for that is there's inevitable good success there all the time. And not only because of the work, but demographically, it's going to happen automatically. We're going to be receiving more and more a flow of Latino students inevitably. So the university loves to say, look at our percentage, 25%, 30%, da, 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 da. No, let's look at the graduation rate. No, let's look at the faculty in the sciences. Latino how many are there? Where are they? Count them and then expose them and share them with the chancellor and the provost. Activism has to be connected to your direct knowledge and interests and your base, and you have impact, you have power. You're paying, and it is a public university. Your parents built those buildings. That's what I used to tell the kids. My parents built this. Your parents built it. And you're not here, you're out there still building more buildings. You could be studying how to, create the city, not just this building. Anyway, so this is kind of the beginning. If there's no pressure for more faculty, there's not going to be more faculty. And you won't get more graduate students unless you get more faculty. Because faculty like to work with students that are interested in their disciplines, and generally these cultural dynamics and affinities with women, with men, they exist. Scientists, these affinities exist. They're natural and they're a part. Even though we've been made to believe that it's unnatural for us to mentor a Latino or Latino, even though that's our responsibility, and that's the responsibility that's been given to us in the university, because we're the onlys still, the onlys. Remember those days? I was the only vice chancellor, Latino in the entire system, Latino. We have to go beyond the onlys. There's still a lot of onlys, and expose that, particularly where there's definite weaknesses. And one of the problems we have is we're strong in education in the social sciences, generally. Stronger, I'll say. And extremely anemic in the sciences and engineering and computer sciences. And numerically speaking, right now. I don't want to castigate any of these individual groups, but we should be balanced. That should be another effort. We should be having not only our faculty in Chicano-Latino studies, that's ghettoizing and colonizing us once again, potentially. At the same time, I don't want those programs integrated and assimilated into humanities, because they will be erased again. So there is an essential need for these departments and schools or programs, but they can't be a sop. They can't be the answer to HSI status or the needs of Latino community at all. And then there's a scholarship and financial aid dimension that should be fought for as well. Again, another resources. Almost all our institutions have endowments, and the pressure is building to start looking at those endowments, and it's going to happen in greater and greater pressure, because the financial crisis is coming in the next few months to the universities. It's going to be profound, especially if we don't get a good stimulus. Even if we get a stimulus, there's going to be financial crunch coming down on the universities. People are going to be let go. Students are going to receive less money. There's all these and what I'm saying then is you shouldn't be receiving the answers. You should be participating in the processes that develop the strategies. They need your voice. And the way to do it, if they're not involving you from the get-go, is to involve yourselves. Do it yourselves, and then present your proposal to their body, or to their president, or chancellor, or vice chancellor, or vice provost. You have, what you need to do is get agency. And that's hard to do. How do you get agency if you don't have agency? How do you do that? It's hard to do. But how did the African Americans get agency when they sat down on that counter and sat there until they got served, and they never got served, they got busted. But they took the agency, sat down, served me. That's all it takes for you guys. Put your proposals, your ideas together, go sit down with your senior officials and say, this is what we need, this is what we want, how can you help us? and there's grants, and there are resources. And right now it's very difficult because of the remote learning. It's very, very difficult because these things that I'm describing are much better, of course, in person, right? Meetings, real. But we live in a remote world now, so you better start, we can do it remotely too. Right now at Columbia, there's a remote strike going on tuition. A big issue going on right now regarding in San Diego. There's almost a strike developing in San Diego State because of the Senate just made a decision to go remote in the spring. They wanted to come back, but they took Cesar Chavez Day as one of their regular days off. Anyway, there's a big protest developing there because they didn't involve the students. The Senate made the decisions for themselves of what would be convenient for them, but not necessarily what was convenient for the students. And who's paying? Well, you guys aren't, your parents are, right? Well, everybody's paying, right? So the way you become a part of the university is by participating in the university's processes. Stick your nose into the tent and stick your feet and a couple of fists and you'll get what you want. Because they want to give you what you want also, by the way. They don't know what you want. They don't know what you need. And we need faculty. So you tell them, we need faculty that understand us and connect to us. And with the faculty, we'll get more graduate students because they'll come and talk to students. And the graduate students will help our undergraduates. And we need, more resources to travel to Coachella to go bring more students from the rural areas. And we need resources to start a computer summer program for women to be able to learn coding so that they can also begin to represent us in the technological fields. Those things don't happen like that. You have to ask for them and then you can develop them. There's something called La Escuelita that's been going on since 1969 in Irvine, La Escuelita. And I know the guy, he's a judge in Santa Ana, Salvador Sarmiento, that started the program. He's so proud when he sees Escuelita propaganda coming out of UCI. It makes him feel so good. I tell him, well, give him some more money. You know?
She was one of the students that immediately submitted her questions and has been like really like on it, with all of COVID and everything, just always being connected to us and wanting to do the best possible. So if Angeles is still here, I would appreciate her asking her question.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gomez. I just want to thank you for your time here today. My name is Ana Elizabeth Rosas, and I am a third-year public health policy major from Aliso Viejo, Orange County. And I feel like you kind of touched on this question, but my question was, being the first Latino Vice Chancellor in the UC system, what feelings did this academic leadership role and work inspire being appointed to undertake this position? Did you feel excited? Were you eager to get to work? Were you intimidated, honored?
Well, my first job I ever had was in Oakland schools, and I walked into the school district and I remember the secretary looking at me. I walked in, I was hired as an associate director for the Office of Community Relations, which is an interesting district office to develop more Latino participation in the schools mostly. And then I developed multicultural curricular materials. But I walked into the school, the high school, and the secretary said, oh, yes, you must be here for the new janitorial job. I immediately assumed that I was a janitor for the new job. That was a little bit of a jolt, but I had a couple of jolts like that earlier also from other encounters, right? So I just corrected her and said, no, I'm here to actually visit with the principal and talk about some stuff. Oh, and she apologized, made a very, but I had awkward moments like that. In terms of lacking confidence, when I was in high school, a teacher put me in a speech class in the 9th grade, my junior high school teacher, against my knowledge and against my will, put me in a speech class in the 9th grade in high school. Why did he do that? I had no idea until much later. He was developing, he knew what he was doing, I didn't. And I was trembling, my legs were shaking, I couldn't speak, my throat would get tight, honestly, everything. And every day we had to do a little talk, impromptu introduction. We had to stand up in front of that. And I hated it to death. And it took me a week to get all the signatures and to sign up for a different class. I went to the teacher, I got out, and the teacher said, are you sure you want to get out? I said, yes, I am. Well, before you decide, can I just show you one thing? And he opened up his grade book, 5 days in a row. He said, look, I had 5 A's. I think it was a lie. I think he lied purposely because of my friend teacher in the junior high. And of course I changed my mind. Oh, I guess I'll stay. I stayed in the class. Well, it helped me gain, I got very involved in speech and debate and original oratory, Lions Club. As a high school kid, I was really into speaking a lot. Well, I got into college and then I got into the Chicano movement, and all of a sudden I was speaking to lots of large crowds, and all of a sudden all that lacking of confidence in high school that I had, all that preparation in that one speech class for 1 year, it all came, it all came into my head about, introduction, body, conclusion. Because a lot of people get up like me right now and they get up and start talking and they don't know when to stop. They get nervous. Have you seen that? Because they get up in front of a microphone and they're awkward because they don't have all of the experience of knowledge of what they want to say, and they're there, and it's awkward for the audience and it's awkward for the speaker. Well, I went through all of that, every single one of those pains. So I lacked confidence for sure. So my secret for not having lack of confidence in my work is I don't know how to say it, man. I was never going to be surprised. I was always more prepared than whatever meeting I was going to go into, and or whatever class I was going to go into. I have read the books of the professor more than he read his own. I mean, I would read the books of every professor that I would take. I wanted to know what they had written. And when I had conversations with them, they liked me because I had read their stuff. Very muy sencillo.
Thank you so much. I mean, everything you're saying resonates with me, even when we think about this idea of how we age as we do, and how much work we have to do to even be in spaces and to be there in ways in which we're contributing and we feel we're honoring that role. I think everything of what you shared with us really echoes like the kinds of work that goes with being able to work. I think that's the part that I really appreciate, because it's great for students to hear it from you at this stage of what you're doing and how much you've already achieved and experienced. I find myself oftentimes asking students to think about it that way as well, because like yourself, I think that's what's allowed me to still have a way of being at UCI and other contexts, this idea that you don't take the opportunity to be there for granted. There's always work involved. And every time you say yes, or whatever the situation is because you realize you're going to give it a time, you're going to give it, like you said earlier, attention. And so that's a real, I want to say, lesson and process to think about as we grow and as we develop confidence, as you are highlighting. And so by way of segueing into concluding, I wanted us to think a little bit more about how people can continue to learn from you. And you have provided us with Dancing with the Sun, but there's a new book that you recently published. And I was wondering if you could give us some insight into that publication as we find ways to conclude, because it's very hard, because you've offered so much and it's been so helpful, especially in the context of COVID and Zoom. And so thank you for it all. But what can you tell us about My First 5 Tastes of Tibetan Buddhism?
Thank you, Ana. Thank you, Mana, for all those nice remarks. It's interesting how, in a way, we do get fairly intimate in this virtual space. I mean, I can feel like I'm already beginning to know some of you and feel a little closer to each of you in this conversation. And it's been a wonderful discussion. The book, My First 5 Tastes of Tibetan Buddhism, started with UCI students. They came to invite me in 2010 if I would go to India to Dharamsala with them. Prior to that, I had already invited the Dalai Lama to UCI numerous times, and we had established the only public university with a Dalai Lama Scholars Program at UCI. And he had been to UCI in awkward ways. He had been here when he received the Nobel laureate, just by chance. Then he came in 2004. Then he came back, we brought him back in 2008. And then he came on his own for celebrating his 80th birthday at UCI. So he has a kind of a special linkage and connection to this place, to this area. We have scholars that have met with the Dalai Lama every year. By good fortune, when he's around, our Dalai Lama scholars are able to meet with His Holiness. When we went to Dharamsala, the students really invited me because they wanted to get a private audience with him. And they thought that if they brought me along, they'd get a better chance of doing so. And they did, but it was a great experience. And what happened is I just wrote the 5 poems immediately when I came back. I don't want to read any of the poems to you, but I will read to you from the introduction, if you don't mind. Or the one point I want to say here is, I do know our world is in a time of turmoil. We are experiencing difficult and a dangerous turn. Social systems are in deep crises. We are all in pain from our divided spaces. We rage against each other and ourselves. We live in a land where people no longer know the difference between the truth and a lie, fact or fiction, real or fake. We are becoming strangers to each other. Our present moment foretells of prolonged social struggles for human dignity and enduring resistance to tyranny. With growing social inequality, increasing intolerance, and numbing political and environmental cruelty, our world is in a desperate need of seekers of justice and truth.
And you really can't read one, like, para terminar?
Perdón, you want to read one of
You
the
really,
poems?
yeah, one of the poems para terminar, para empezar como terminamos. That would be really awesome.
To terminate, I'll do one of the poems. Ignorance or compassion, choose. I'll do both.
Okay.
Only 1 minute. This is the third taste, ignorance. Not knowing why, open your eyes, see the suffering. Not knowing why, see the blindness. Not knowing why, open your eyes, see the dreams. Not knowing why, see the sadness. Not knowing why, open your eyes, see the lies. Not knowing why, see the madness. Now, knowing why, open your eyes, see the root cause. Now, knowing why, see happiness. It is possible. Open your eyes. It is possible to see the reason why wisdom is emptiness. Second poem, the fourth taste is called compassion, real quick. With a kind heart, hold all others more dear than self. Bring no harm to others. With true peace of mind, practice patience. Let your enemies become your teachers. With loving kindness, carry the burden for the benefit of others. Bring all blame upon yourself. Everything we do, think or say, every action we take comes back to us one day. Let your mind see we are all one ocean, one universe, one family, dependent on each other in love and compassion.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I can't wait to like share with my students, purchase it. Thank you. Thank you. Again, para mí es un honor. You know, I grew up very much attentive to a lot of what you're sharing, a lot of my family's experiences. You mirror a lot of that. It just means a lot. It kind of, in many ways, allowed me to think back and think through. And so ha sido un privilegio, como siempre, every time I hear you speak. I just feel like very much like this idea of what you're saying, that we need to remain very committed to no nomás tradición, pero un hábito de cultivar like a very robust approach to being just proactive about learning from each other, right? That we have so much within, and that's very important to think about. So thank you for this privilege. Thank you for sharing it with our students at UC Irvine, people who've graduated and keep coming back because every time they do, I know because of the emails I get from them and the phone calls that it just makes a world of difference. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope this is more of what's to come. And so again, please look out for Professor Gomez, his work. He has a documentary. There's so many ways you can learn from him. And so thank you for all that you've done within the movement, past the movement, everything. Sue, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
Oh, were you? I thought I was muted. Yeah, no, thank you all so very much for coming. This is just a beautiful afternoon. And thank you, my dear friend. And Ana, you've done such a wonderful job with the students. And thank you all for coming. Gary, thanks for your help too.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary.
Gary, thank you very much, all of you. It was wonderful.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Felices fiestas. Thank you.
Remember, Nikan Tikva, we the people from here.